Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information. Kate Campbell, welcome to this episode of the Australian Finance Podcast.
It is wonderful to be back, Owen, talking about travel this year, which we're all going to do.
Yeah, it's a bit exciting. It's a bit of fun for everyone. We're joined by Monique, podcast manager, in front/behind the mic. How you doing?
I'm great.
That's good. We've all got travel plans this year. So where are you going, Kate?
I wanted to go on a bit of an adventure and I wanted to go for a hike in between uni semesters. So I'm going to the south of France. I'm walking along the south of France on a walking trail that's part of the Camino de Santiago, but in France.
Interesting.
That sounds really fancy.
Yeah, there's a lot of words in there.
You walk from guest house to guest house along the way.
Oh, wow.
And so there'll be, I think it's 10 to 15 kilometres a day of walking. So that'll be fun.
Fun.
Cool. And that's like a few weeks, is it, or something like this?
Nearly 2 weeks, I think. There's a rest day in the middle.
Yeah, cool.
Cool. So you traverse quite a bit of French countryside, which will be lovely. And
Wow.
hopefully lots of little B&Bs and cute little restaurants along the way.
Yeah.
Though I'm going in the peak season in July, so it's going to be very hot.
What a way to see the countryside. Say 9 or 10 days of 15 kilometres. That's a long way to go.
Yeah, well, I went on a walking tour in Tassie a couple of years ago, which is really fun adventure.
Yeah, okay. So this is kind of like the step
Next
up.
step.
Yeah, cool. And Monique, where are you going?
Yeah. So I'm doing a US trip for a month. The first kind of stop is Coachella, the music festival.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've kind of just turned this trip into a music-themed trip. So when we planned to go to New Orleans, there happens to be a jazz festival on. So we're like, well, we got to go to that too. So we're doing that festival as well. And
You're going to Dolly World?
No, unfortunately, I think is that in like Memphis?
I've never been to America, but it sounds cool.
Yeah. Anyway, we're not going there, unfortunately. But then after New Orleans, we're going to go to Nashville, so another music section of America, and just check out all the little bars and local music there.
Cool.
And then I think we're going to fit in Vegas as well, just for fun.
So it's quite the trip, and very music related. And
Yeah.
yes, it's very much on brand for you, which is kind of cool. I myself am kind of doing something that's very much plain Jane compared to the two of you. I'm just going over to Europe for 5 weeks, which is wonderful. Very grateful. We've got like all the usual spots like the UK and countryside of UK, France, Italy, and then a wedding in Greece. So
Beautiful.
it'll be wonderful. It'll be a really, really good time away. But this episode is all about helping people plan holidays. Now, these 3 holidays might sound a bit extravagant to you, particularly if you're running on a tight budget or things like this. So what we're trying to do is just give you some ideas around how you can plan for these types of things. And obviously, we've been planning, each of us respectively, for quite a while at various stages.
I think you've been planning for this trip for a decade, Owen.
Well,
in
it's been
one
a while.
way or another.
Yeah. Well, I haven't been, right? So
Yeah.
when you know this, but back when I was younger, I'm fortunate that my grandparents come from Europe. So to have a passport, citizenship by descent in the UK. So I always planned to go to the UK and work in the UK. And I didn't get a chance to do that because we started the business, right? So this has been a long time coming, and we're really grateful to be able to go now. It's costing a lot, which is fair to say, with flights and accommodation these days. It's quite expensive. But we're really excited. And with this episode, what we want to do is help folks get a sense of how we would plan for something like this and hear different perspectives. Even if you're shopping local, you're traveling locally, which is what I've done over the last few years. There are many tidbits and kind of little helpful things that you can take away from this episode. But Kate, where do we start?
I think we should start by the main thing, which is the cost of the trip, and then sort of thread in all of the different tips and tricks we've got. So I think holidays, especially Europe, they always run over budget.
Yeah.
Like I was sort of mentioning grand designs, though. You always think it's going to cost this much, and then it ends up costing more, especially at the moment. And you and I are kind of going in peak periods, so everything just feels a bit more expensive. When I went last time, I went in the middle of winter, and so not many people want to go, and you don't have to wait in queues for anything, and things are cheaper to do and see. But because I'm going in peak this time, because that's just the only slot I had in the middle of the year, I'm having to pay a lot more for flights, and I'm having to pay a lot more for everything else. So
I suppose you'd have to plan a lot more in advance because things would like book out and stuff as well.
yeah, so I was having a look at hostels, and they're already going to cost more than the previous trips. So that's probably one thing. Just if you can be a bit more flexible. So a lot of people have a bit more flexibility in their jobs and maybe their studies to do it at certain times, but then a lot of people don't. But if you do have flexibility, try and pick off-peak for whatever country or area you're going to.
Yeah.
What month are you going? Like
late June.
Late June. And obviously you said France. I said France, but...
flying into London and out of Geneva.
Agree to disagree. But, what's really interesting is that folks may know this already, but that's when the Olympics are on.
Yes, so avoiding that area.
Yes, so we had intended to go to Paris, and we would have been there right when there was a bit of overlap between the French Open and the Olympics.
Perfect timing.
So the mecca, if you will, of holiday costs in terms of accommodation, it was going to be so much. We started looking at things on booking.com, and we realized it's like $700 a night for a hotel, like a basic, not that crazy.
Yeah, that's insane.
And we were just like, okay, we just completely took that leg out of the holiday. So we just fly straight over Paris down to Nice.
So it's worth finding what's happening, because it might mean there's a better time to go to Paris.
Yeah.
Because if there's a local cultural festival or something like the Fringe Festival in Edinburgh, and then you think you can book on the day or a few weeks out, you might not be able to. It might cost a lot. So just being aware in advance about what's happening allows you to plan your trip a bit better.
It also depends what kind of holiday you want to. If you only have leave during a certain part of the time of the year, you may want a particular type of holiday. So if you want
also, if you only have say the peak hour time off work and you can't really be flexible with the timing, you can kind of choose countries that are a little bit cheaper than others if you're not too fussed on
you told me this
where
the
to
other
go.
day, actually. Yeah.
Like, for example, I mean, things always change and costs always change, but I know like Portugal is kind of like a cheapish country to travel. Instead of doing London would be so much more expensive than Portugal. So there's like those little things I guess you could do as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm going straight to London, just so you know.
Yeah, so good luck.
Yeah, but there's only one Stamford Bridge. Yeah, that's a Chelsea reference. Never mind. Chelsea soccer. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll have a whole list of things for you to do in London. But yeah, if you can plan as far out as possible and then break down your goals. So if it's $5,000 or $10,000, if you can plan 12 or 18 or 24 months out, then you can break that down and figure out, well, what do you need to put aside each month? Same with an emergency fund. You can create a separate savings account or a separate offset account, automate those payments. If you don't have enough disposable income left over each month to hit your monthly targets for your travel fund that's happening in 12 months' time, then maybe it's time to side hustle for 12 months so you can reach this goal if that trip's really important for you, or you can take on some extra shifts, or you can find some way to make some extra income.
Yeah, a friend of ours, she loves to travel, would travel for 6 weeks a year. And she did that for 10 years. And we were always like, that's a very costly exercise. And she would work really, really hard overtime. She'd have 2 jobs almost always. But for her, that was most important to her. It wasn't important, as much to save for like a house or these types of things. What was important to her was travel. So that's what she prioritized in her budget. And she worked really hard for that. And she went to some amazing places in her 20s. And that's perfectly fine. That's okay. We, for example, we've had to make those types of changes which you're talking about, Kate, because even though we planned, the full 12 months ahead of time, everyone knows, listening to this, how expensive flights and accommodation are, or were 12 months ago. We tried to book the maximum amount of time out. A little hack here is that if you do use Velocity or Qantas points, typically what happens when you book your flights, and you can book, say, 12 months in advance or something like this, if you go into the portals to book using your points, is they only reserve a certain number of seats. And within the flight itself, there's only a certain number in each level. So like economy, premier economy, business, or whatever you're flying. And so the key thing there is, even if you have points, you may not get the seat that you want, or you might not even be able to use them at all. So the further ahead you can book, not only is the ticket price cheaper, you will also find if you're using points to travel, which a lot of people do that listen to the show, you're going to get better seats by booking further in advance.
Yeah. And I was going peak time, so I couldn't use my points. There were no classic reward seats available. So if I was going in February, that would be quite
fine.
a different thing. And the other thing about planning this trip further in advance is if you know you're going to travel overseas, well, you can sign up to the mailing list of a travel insurance company, for example, and then you'll get their email when they've got a different sale on saying 20% off travel insurance for the next 48 hours. So if you know it's a cost you need for that trip, you know your dates, then you can pay for the thing you need to pay for anyway with a discount. And that's the same for a lot of accommodation, like booking.com send out sales.
I did that for the internal flights of my America trip. I signed up to all the American airlines, and then once the sale came through, they sent me an email, and then I booked my internal flights.
Okay, not with American Airlines because that's actually an airline.
No, what did you say?
Yeah, plural.
US Airlines.
But that makes a lot of sense. Right? Just be on the list. It's like our frenzy deals that we have here in Australia for Jetstar and
exactly.
And then you just unsubscribe once you've booked the thing.
Yeah, but you mentioned also with the insurance, one of the it's not insurance, but the way I think about it is insurance. With Booking.com, you can book. We've talked about this on the show once before. Is you can book your accommodation and pay later, so you don't have to pay immediately. So it's like a refundable booking, basically.
And locks in the price, doesn't it?
Yeah, it locks in the price. You do pay more for that particular option, but you'll see when you go in, it might be like the King Suite or whatever they call it. And there might be two different options, and they look exactly the same in Booking.com, but one is refundable, one is not.
And it might be $10 or $20 more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So a lot of people after COVID would take that option every day of the week.
Yeah, I've done that option many times.
Yeah, and we did that too. We booked something, and then we changed to an Airbnb.
Yeah.
So once we found something, because we didn't think this particular Airbnb that we wanted, I think it was in Positano or something, we realized that wasn't available. And then it came available, and we're like, oh, okay, well, we'll do that one and take away the Booking.com thing.
Beautiful.
And with Booking.com, we've mentioned as well on the show, if you can use a cashback app like Cash Rewards or Honey or even Raise Rewards where you get a cashback amount back invested for you, do that, because especially when we're spending more money on accommodation and flights, this is the time when it makes sense to use a rewards or a cashback platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something that we've talked about a lot that's basically what I use Raise Rewards for. Is I book, so you go through Raise Rewards, then you go into Booking.com, then you book, and you'll get, say, about 4 or 5%, depending on the promo at the time. 4 or 5% of your Booking.com fee will be reinvested into your Raise portfolio, which is just a portfolio of ETFs, typically. And it's a great way to start building a little portfolio on the side. And you can get up, if you're going to Europe, for example, on an extensive holiday, or you've got some travel plans over the next year, that could be a few $100s. It could be a few $1,000s by the end of the year once you've got roundups and things going on as well. So it's a really good way to kind of dollar cost average into investing you don't even realize. There was another thing about the insurance angle, which I was talking to a mate about this on the weekend. He just signed up, and we don't advocate for this, just so we're fully across this. We don't necessarily advocate for this, and we don't talk about it a lot on the show for this deliberate reason, but a lot of people do use credit cards. It's pretty well known that a lot of people that listen to the show will use credit cards for budgeting and use it responsibly, of course. And so a friend of mine signed up to something, and he was able to book his accommodation overseas using he had an Amex. I think it was like the Centurion one. You can look at the T's and C's yourself. But effectively, he discovered, when we started talking about it over lunch, he discovered that he may have travel insurance that applies through his credit card because he booked through his credit card. And that's a really important little extra thing that you may get as part of your deal, but obviously read the terms and conditions and know that it may not be as good as, say, insert XYZ travel insurance. So if you do have that, it might save you some money. It might even give you peace of mind that, hey, I don't have travel insurance yet, because one of the good pieces of advice is get the travel insurance early, because when you start booking things, you can get the cover. But if you leave it until, I'm going away to Bali tomorrow, I'm going to get the travel insurance today, you might not be covered for things that you've already spent on. So keep that in mind too. And that's really it for insurance. But I just want to double click maybe one quick thing on the offset account. I think the offset account is the best place if you have a mortgage to put your money for your holidays. If you don't have an offset account, if you don't have a mortgage, congrats to you. Put it in a high interest savings account. Yeah. It's not the type of thing that you would invest.
No.
We probably have some people out there that would invest in ETFs or something like that. I don't think that's very sensible. Yeah. Cool. Okay. What else we got?
My other tip is to have multiple ways to access your money. This is less about planning for the trip, but planning for using your money while you're there, because when I lost access to my iPhone on my previous trip because it fell into the youth hostel toilet, that was at the very beginning of the trip. Now, there are some banks that are app only and don't have web access, and you might not have all your passwords to things because they were stored in a notes file on your phone. So you need to have other ways to access your money, have your money for your trip on multiple bank providers, multiple cards. If you can take a backup phone, I mean, that's not an option for everyone, but maybe you can get just a cheap phone where you can set up access to some of these accounts. That could be good to put at the bottom of your bag. Luckily, I took my iPad because I figured I might want to watch something or need it to read a book. And so I was able to access some of my bank providers, not all of them, through there and transfer things across. And then my parents did point out to me, they sent me a message saying that you can still do an ATM balance check. So I was able to put the physical card in the ATM and click balance check, which I haven't done this since I was a kid, pre-online banking. And I was able to find out how much I had so I could keep track of things and move things around. So yes, multiple ways to access your money, backups. If you have an eSIM, that's one way you can port things across. A lot of travel providers will create an eSIM so you can text and use internet while you're going without having to remove your phone's physical SIM.
I've got the eSIM happening.
Do you? What kind of device is that running? Is that Apple?
At the moment, yes.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Yeah, so Apple does have the eSIM functionality, which is pretty cool.
But even backups, like I was having to use the iPad for maps, and walking around the streets of London with an iPad and the map out, it looks really cool. So I was having to take a lot of screenshots, and even going to shows with my iPad backup, I was having to hold out the iPad, and people were having to scan the QR code, which was massive because it came up on the screen big and you couldn't make it smaller. And the person at the shop's having to hold their device out to scan it. So yeah, maybe a backup phone would be handy.
Yeah.
If you're traveling with another person, that might be easier. But if you're solo traveling, having a few more backups, especially if you're going to places where you might not be able to go and just find a new phone very easily.
Yeah, one of the things to keep in mind is that a lot of the places have reciprocal rights. So if you're a Telstra customer, for example, I'm sure Optus has similar type arrangements, but there's typically, and Vodafone are really good at this actually, they have quid pro quos. So for example, if you go on the Telstra website, you can see all the countries that have some type of roaming option or like a fixed plan where you go to that country and it can automatically apply depending on whether you want the internet from that country. But there are other options which you would want to plan in advance, because oftentimes people that get into the airports and try and buy the SIMs, they're quite expensive or those types of things.
And take a little bit of cash.
Yeah.
It's always good to have a little bit of cash just in case you lose all of your
Or you
stuff.
might just stumble upon a cash-only market and you see that fur coat that you've dreamt of for your whole life and you need to buy it.
Did you?
I mean, I went to the farmer's market on the weekend and there was a stall and they'd put the potatoes in a paper bag and then they said cash only and had to walk away. Yeah. No potatoes for me.
It happens.
And particularly important overseas where, depending on where you travel, there may not be the simple, tap and go type situations that we have here. One of the things that I would say that's helped us this time around is just asking your friends and family for their opinion on where you're going. Obviously, you might want to just get a few sources so you're not conflicted too much. But what you're trying to get at is you're trying to understand what they think they would have done better if they were in that area. So you can just ask them, what would you have done differently? Or what was your favorite place? Or something like this. And that's definitely the case with us. Like when we're staying at a part in Italy, we learnt that to get from Naples to where we needed to go, it was really, really complicated. And it was just the private driver alone, I think, was about €200. And that's the easiest way to get there unless we're going to go on a 4-hour bus trip through these winding hills, which I get a bit travel sick on the buses, so it's probably not the best idea. So knowing those types of things are really handy. If you don't have someone that's been to your area, use TripAdvisor. I trust TripAdvisor overseas with basically everything.
There's probably lots of travel Facebook groups.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. I'm not in any, but I can imagine, given there's a Facebook
Surely.
group for everything else.
But we were able to book a place in Italy that has its own beach. You go down this really steep set of stairs and you go to your own beach. And the only reason we discovered that was through the in-laws. They'd stayed there before. And we never would have found that on Airbnb or whatever because it doesn't go on Airbnb. It's a family-run thing.
Yeah.
So having someone that's been there and done that before is really, really great. So use them if you've got them at your disposal.
And that's the fun thing, telling people about your trip in advance. You do get to hear everyone's thoughts and feedback and, oh, you should stay here, or this is a really cool place, or this is where you get the best tiramisu in Rome. So that's a good way to sort of crowdsource your experience as well.
Yeah. We my in-laws have travelled a lot through the Azamara cruise lines. You guys probably wouldn't be familiar with that, but typically it's not just older people, but anyone really. Azamara is kind of like a step up on cruising throughout the Mediterranean and places like this throughout Europe, but also around the world. And one of the things that Azamara does really well is it's like all-inclusive, and you can search for Azamara Cruises sales, and there'll be a few websites that pop up. But you can get some seriously good value that you could go away for 30 or 40 days, different city every second day, and you'll be amazed at the cost, and it's all-inclusive. So look that up if you're inclined to travel by boat. They're not dinghies, they're like proper boats, but they're not big cruise ships either. They're more kind of, I guess, intimate and much nicer.
Also, like Flight Centre and even Jetstar and stuff, they do those holiday packages that seem like, I've never done one before, but they seem pretty worth it.
Yeah.
Including like flights and accommodation, it usually is.
Yeah, and they're good partner airlines.
I've always heard good things from people who have done luxury escapes to Thailand or Vietnam.
We've done luxury escapes a couple of times.
Bali?
Yeah, we did a luxury escape here in Australia up to Palm Cove in Queensland.
Beautiful.
We stayed at the Reef House, for those of you that know it. It's really lovely. And we wouldn't have probably paid for that on our own dime, but to do it through luxury escapes, we got, was one degustation dinner, we got breakfast included, like all of these things.
Happy hour, those kind of things.
Nice.
And they were all included, and it was really, really good value. So keep an eye out for those things.
Yeah. It seems on the
save a lot
outside
of
that
money.
packages or group tours or cruises cost more, but when you do the numbers, especially if it's in an area you're not super familiar with, or there'd be a lot of tricky bits to get, you'd have to take this train and this bus to get to this area, sometimes it's actually worth it as opposed to hiring a car and doing all of that on your own, especially if you're solo traveling.
Yeah, my mum went away with her partner, and they got to Europe and they were planning this month-long thing. They were just going to kind of wing it, is what I would say. And some bad things happened. They had some money stolen and all this sort of stuff, and it was a pretty bad experience for them in France. And they ended up coming home early. And so it's been really hard to get them back on the bandwagon of traveling. But what we said to them is, well, why don't you just go with the flow and let someone else do it for you? And one of the easiest ways to do that is through one of those all-inclusive packages. And so if your family is reluctant to travel, or for whatever reason, it's actually a really good way to do it, because you're traveling as a group with people on the boat, if you do whatever, coach or whatever you're doing, if you're going to like the Rocky Mountaineer or something like that, you get to know people, and it's a really lovely way to do it. In terms of like some travel apps and things that you can use, we've already mentioned TripAdvisor. There are a bunch of different things, like we mentioned Raise and Cash Rewards and things like this, where you can get money back for the money that you spend. I will throw out one extra one, which is we use Wise, and I know you've got this in your notes, Kate, but we even use Wise here as a business at Rask. We use it to pay our offshore team, and the money is in the Philippines in 20 minutes. And it's fully transparent, super, super low fees. And as an individual, you can get a card, like a physical card. You can get Apple Pay, or I'm sure there's a Samsung equivalent. And you can transfer money to your digital wallet.
Always making a dig at Monique.
Oh, God.
Samsung
She's on the iPhone bandwagon these days.
Not for long.
Oh, Monique has taken it upon herself to be the personal ambassador for Samsung. So any criticism is an affront.
So Samsung, send us your phone. Monique will try it out. But seriously, so with Wise, it's really, really low transparent pricing. And it's fast, it's easy, it's secure, and it's basically every currency anyone could want. So I would highly recommend Wise. It's not like we don't have any sort of affiliate for any of this stuff, but it is a really useful tool, and I've found it to be the best, basically no matter where I go. If you use ING, you get your ATM withdrawal fees back, and they got pretty good international transfers, but a lot of the banks sting people through the transactions.
Yeah. So you want a bank that's international travel friendly and gives you the best spot rate and doesn't charge you an international transaction fee. So if you've ever shopped online overseas and you see a second transaction appear straight after saying international transaction fee 50 cents, then your bank's probably not been that friendly for you for international travel. So it might be worth finding a better option.
Yeah, and you only have to use it for your trip. Like we can, at Rask, when we make international transactions, like for our company card, we can actually pay like $5 or $10. And that's even when we're just paying Facebook or Google for our workspace suite. So they can actually add up. Like if you're doing overseas hotels or something like this, seriously look at those fees, because you might go, oh, it's only $2 for an international transaction. Yeah, but there's a hidden fee which doesn't appear in your statement, which is the spread in the FX. So in the currency, that's where something like Wise really comes in. Is like an OF. People are familiar with OFX, another Australian business. Sorry, Wise is an Australian, but yeah, OFX. And you can transfer money like super low cost, super fast. So I would highly encourage people to check those out. Yeah.
In terms of helpful apps, I found Rome to Rio really good, because you can say, I want to go from here to here to here to here to here, and it plans out the most sensible route for you, especially if you know where all of these places are logistically from each other. So it gives you the options for, this is what airfare would cost, this is what boat would cost, ferry, I don't know, what the different options. So you can make the best decision for you based off your budget.
Well, that's actually a really good idea, because one of the things that people get stumped with is in different parts of the world, sometimes you may not be able to book the transport system the same way you do here. There might not be just one transport booking service. There might be multiple. It might be cheaper to go by air, by ferry, by whatever. And so
in some parts of Europe, it actually makes more sense to get the train than the plane.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it does. Or some instances, it might make sense to drive or maybe catch a bus about, whatever. So this is a really good app.
Skyscanner is a good one for just flights, to compare the prices of flights as well.
Yeah. Kate, do you know What If? Have you ever heard of that website?
I've heard of it, but I haven't used it.
Yeah, right. I was just wondering, because an ad came up yesterday in my app store, and I was like, oh, okay.
What if?
But yeah, like,
what does it do?
Flight Centre, it's the same. It's like hotel bookings and that type of thing. But Webjet does similar types of things. There is, I was going to mention something else. Maybe I'll get to it in a minute, but you keep going with your apps, Kate, actually.
Yeah, there's another one I really like called Get Your Guide. So if you are wanting to do tours or all sorts of different activities, whether you want to do a food tasting experience or you want to go for a tour around Rome or anything like that, a bicycle ride in the countryside, you can book all these things through the app. It's a bit like Airbnb, so different tour or activity providers can put their activity on the platform and people can review it, and you book through there, so you get all the booking confirmation and everything. So you can read reviews, you get all the detail on the start time and stuff like that. So I use that quite a bit in my last trip, and I'll use it again. But
cool.
That is good because you get to see reviews. Airbnb experiences is another thing.
Yeah.
I haven't used it, but it looks quite good.
Yeah, I've seen that. I haven't used it either.
You tried it out?
I set up my own experience one time, and then it didn't ever happen. That's my extent.
Okay.
Well, a photography walking tour in Melbourne?
Tour around Melbourne.
Oh,
yeah.
You're very predictable.
It was when I had no job, okay?
If anyone wants a photo tour around Melbourne.
Are you offering private tours?
Not anymore.
And Hostel World.
Yep.
If you are on a hostel budget, great app. You can sort through and find different options for different places. Sort by price. If you want a female, male only accommodation, you can see what the things are. If it has an ensuite, everything in one spot. And you can have your hostels for all your different countries in one app. And that makes life a lot easier than trying to find emails from 10 different booking places.
That's cool. I like that. So Hostel World. Yeah, there's so many different apps and tools out there. I think one of the ones that's obvious is Airbnb. You did mention it before, but still people are reluctant to travel with Airbnb, I find, in some instances, but actually probably half of our bookings are through Airbnb. And just compare the prices, read the reviews.
It's worked really well in Australia for me.
Yeah, it's worked really well for us around the world. Like we've done it in Vancouver, New York, all over. And
sometimes you find really cute, unique places as well. So
yeah, and for a good price, you're surprised because some people might be letting their house for a different reason. Like they might not be there. Speaking of, one of the things that's a bit outside kind of like the box, which is you can actually, if you're traveling for an extended period, you can use things like trusted house sitters which is a tool that I've used for both sides of the fence, being a letter and someone who then takes on someone else's house. So trusted house sitters or trusted pet sitters. There's another one called Aussie house sitters. There's so many different ones. Just have a look through the different options. We'll put some links in the show notes. But basically, these are websites where you can help someone. And I've got one right here from Trusted House Sitters. They estimate that they have saved people $500 million in accommodation and pet care costs during their travels. So that's over 10 years. So to give you a sense of how much money can be saved, I've heard of people saving up to 30% on their travel plans by house sitting. And the reason, so how does this work? So basically you go on, you get verified. On most of the good platforms, you have to verify through ID and all these other things, and then you have to get reviews. But say a place like London is probably one of the most popular for these platforms in the world because people in London love to travel. They typically have higher paying wages and they're so close to the rest of Europe, so they travel quite a bit. But those people have pets. Those people have houses. They have plants that need watering. So they put their houses up for grabs on this platform. It doesn't cost you anything as a user unless you pay to get verified. And you can take on the responsibility of their house. And of course, you can't then go, oh, I'm just going to go to, I don't know, Positano for a weekend. You have to be at the house and you have to fulfill your obligation. But you can actually experience local culture in a way that you probably didn't think before, and it doesn't cost you anything. And then likewise, we were saying this before, like when we're traveling, my partner, she doesn't have enough leave to cover the whole stay of us being away. So like if we're away for 5 weeks, she only has 2 weeks of leave. That means there's 3 weeks where she's not getting paid. So our mortgage doesn't stop. So if we were to put the animals in kennels and that sort of stuff, the costs would just rack up. It'd be huge, right? So what we're doing is we're letting the house out. So someone can stay in the house while we're away and take care of the animals. It costs us nothing, costs them nothing. Once we've been through that rigmarole, it actually saves us money by having someone in the house.
Because that's the flip side of travel that I don't think we've talked about much, is that your life keeps costing money back home. Even if you're not there, you still get your regular monthly bills. The internet still gets
you got your
charged.
rent, you got your subscriptions.
Your phone plan. Most people wouldn't cancel or pause them all for a month. Maybe with your gym, you could put that on hold for a month. But most things like your mortgage just keep going. And so not only do you need to save the money for the trip when you're planning, you need to save the money for all the bills at home, especially if you don't have enough annual leave to just automatically pay for everything.
Or something like that. Yeah, it doesn't stop, right?
A lot of Australians now are contractors, casuals doing part-time work. And so you need to factor that into your travel budget as well. You need to have the money for the trip plus the costs for your life back home.
Yeah, and this is where these pet sitting or house sitting things can actually help, because someone's there taking care of your animals. Like for anyone that's ever had their dogs, cats, other animals in kennels or whatever, it is so expensive. It is super expensive. There are some Facebook groups, by the way, that may operate in your area where you can actually have people that they're not full-blown kennels, but they'll say, we'll take your pet for $20 a day. And it's just like a arrangement that you come to on the spot. So those are available. But for anyone that's been through the kennel experience, you know how expensive that is. You worry about whether your loved ones being the pets, your fur babies, get the treatment that you want. So you can use one of these platforms. And it's a great way to both travel and to save a bit of money when you're leaving the home. And finally, I did mention it before, but I would encourage everyone to make the most of their points. So points hacking is a real thing. There are risks involved. But if you're a business owner, you can still sign up for credit cards and again, make sure you pay them off. But you can earn points through your business.
But even if your company is booking new flights for work, you can often provide your Qantas frequent flyer or Virgin frequent flyer number as well and get points that way.
Well, when we book, as you guys know, when we go to Sydney or we go traveling for events and stuff at Rask, all of you guys have your Velocity points added to your own accounts and the business gets the points.
Yeah, we travelled enough last year that I got enough Virgin points to get 2 return domestic flights.
There you go. And
you just have to pay the fees and taxes.
Yeah, which is pretty nominal. But then I was telling Monique too, like through your business, if you work for a small business, you may have, like we do, we have a business flyer account, which gives us special rights and privileges because we fly so much. We can actually book flights cheaper than you can get online because we fly so often. So like if you're flying for your personal reasons, there's no reason you can't use the same booking system to book. And there's a lot of arrangements like that out there. So you could explore those options as well. But business owners, I would highly encourage you to explore how you can get points through your business and how you can kind of aggregate points. So one of the ways you can do that is if you live at the same residential address, you can often bundle your Flybys, your Coles Plus subscription, which we talked about in a recent Money and Chill, your Raise account, or whatever the case may be. Wherever you're accumulating points and things, you can often pull them together. Like in Virgin Velocity, you can pull your points together, which is something that we do. So that one person typically has like the Platinum card. The other person doesn't really have one, but because that person's at Platinum, they can access the benefits that would come with that. Which is a way to save. Like we say, to put it in perspective, we probably saved around about $4,000 by using this system going to Europe because we were able to accumulate enough points that we booked premium economy with a really good flight back from Europe. So that's how much it actually translates to, in addition to the Raise stuff, which is a few $100s. So probably save $5,000 through using these simple little systems.
I mean, when you're booking expensive things like travel, you got to take advantage of whatever systems, discounts, rewards available that you can, really. Yeah.
So there's a lot to go on. I think there's plenty of different apps that we can put in the show notes for you to explore in your own time. But I think the key thing is just like plan.
Give yourself time to book things in advance, make use of discounts and sales, and booking in advance gives you time to anticipate the experience, which also gives you a happiness boost.
From the author of Buying Happiness, Kate Campbell, there you go.
Had to sneak that one in, but the more time you have to think about the trip, to talk about it with friends and family, to research different places, that's a huge amount of the happiness we get from the overall experience. So maybe don't book everything just the week out, especially if you're going in peak time to Europe. That will probably cost you a lot more money.
Yeah, it would. And some people do like a bit of spontaneity. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do that. Like I'm a huge fan of that. I don't like having everything booked, but the big rocks you want, like your flights, it makes so much sense to book in advance, so much sense. For key accommodation destinations, you don't have to book it all, but just the more expensive ones, maybe you do want to book in advance.
Or if you want to go somewhere quite niche, there might not be that much accommodation available.
Yeah.
Or you might turn up on a festival day. So
Well, I had to book mine very, very far in advance. Otherwise, everything
you
gone.
couldn't just rock up to Coachella with no accommodation.
It's in the middle of nowhere and there's like 3 Airbnbs there.
I remember Queenie telling me the cost of the pizzas at Coachella. So you better take some food with you.
Definitely packing some food with us.
Pack some snacks.
Yeah.
If you do have any travel-related tips or tricks that you want to share with the community, please write into us. There's a link in the show notes that says Ask a Question. You can also use that to submit feedback.
We'll share them in the next Money and Chill episode.
Yes, we will. And you can also find us on Instagram predominantly, or over on X for those of you that are a bit more adventurous in the Wild West. You can reach out to us and share your travel-related hacks because we do love to hear from you because we are traveling and we like saving money as much as the next guy or gal. So write into us, help us out, and we'll, in exchange, be able to help out the community as well. So Samsung, if you're listening, Monique would love a new phone to try out.
I mean, she's the first of us to leave, so not got much time.
Yeah. So send it now, quick. But ladies, this was heaps of fun. So Monique, thanks for joining us.
Anytime.
And Kate, as always, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more. Imagine if Samsung does actually send you a
That'll
phone.
be a dream come true.
Out of 90,000 listeners, surely one works for Samsung.